When we are looking at a quadratic equation to determine the nature of the roots, we need the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a is the quadratic formula. The b squared minus this 4ac, the stuff underneath this radical, is called the discriminant. And the discriminant is going to tell us how many and what kind of answers you're going to have. As you have gone through, you've probably worked several different problems using the quadratic formula before, and say when you're working through that problem, you get an answer -3 plus or minus the square root of 23 over 2, for instance. Okay, this 23 is a real number, and the real number, when you take the square root, this plus or minus tells you that there are two answers. So the discriminant b squared minus 4ac, if that number, the number underneath the radical, is positive, positive means greater than 0, you will have two real answers. The next thing that you're going to look at is what happens if there is a negative underneath that radical. B squared minus 4ac negative. Now, in upper level math, we don't say, oh, there's no solution, you can't do it. We say that there are going to be two imaginary, and the correct answer is not just two imaginary answers, but two non-real meaning imaginary, complex solutions. So two non-real complex solutions. So depending on which math you're in, may depend on what your teacher wants you to call those. They are imaginary numbers. When you look at the square root of a -12 underneath a radical, we say that the 4 plus or minus the I, and then we have to break down that 12 into 4 times 3. Square root of 4 is 2, so 4 plus or minus 2i radical 3 over 2. There's a factor that you can factor out of 2, leaving 2 plus or minus I radical 3. The plus or minus is the conjugate. Some teachers may want you to say 2 complex conjugates. Complex meaning you have a real number and the imaginary part together. There is a third option, is if it equals 0. So if the discriminant equals 0, plus or minus 0 is just whatever this number was that was the opposite of b over your 2a, which means that you are going to have one real answer or one real solution. So the discriminant, the thing underneath the radical in the quadratic formula, the b squared minus the 4ac, tells you how many and what kind of solutions you're going to have. Positive, two real. Negative numbers are two non-real complex. If it's equal to 0, one real.